Ray had already lost a lot of blood by the time they had reached their destination, and he had even started to feel quite sluggish and very out of it by then. Edward had assumed that he was just feeling floaty because of the blood loss and he would get better after being treated by the doctor. They just had to hurry for that to happen. They couldn't afford to lose any more time. He had pumped up the car even more after that thought had crossed his mind, and now they were finally outside of the casino the doctor was at. Edward pulled up by the side of the road, practically jumped out of the car, and then proceeded to almost drag Ray out of his seat in his hurry. He rushed Ray into the casino, yelling at people to make way and yelling more for the doctor to come over and have a look. The staff rushed over to help, some leading them to a secluded room upstairs that was used as the doctor's office, away from all the customers and their commotion, and helped to carry him up the stairs. A few of them hurriedly picked up the trail of bloody mess and rags from the floor that they were leaving behind in their wake. As soon as they reached the aforementioned room, Edward quickly placed Ray on the nearby table that was big enough to suit him. The doctor had reached the room by then too, practically following right behind. He walked over to the table that Ray laid upon, with his eyeglasses tilted down to the bridge of his nose, holding an open book in his hands. He gave Ray a quick cursory once-over, and his sight immediately zoomed in on the open wound on his hand, his eyes going wide in surprise.
"What the heck happened to him? How did he tear up his hand so bad?"
he inquired, sounding as surprised as he looked.
"We came across some rocks that we found inside the tunnel we was digging up, and Ray here decided to pick up a sharp rock, resulting in, this,"
Edward replied, vaguely gesturing and moving away from the table, giving way so the doctor could see Ray closer and treat him better. The doctor asked someone to bring him his bag while he checked the vitals and tried to assess the damage done to the wounded hand. Ray was looking really worse for the wear by then. He was almost delirious with pain and blood loss, and so very pale that he could be thought dead, if not for the presence of a very faint pulse the doctor had found in his not-as-bloodied arm. As soon as his bag was brought over, the doctor rushed to get an injection out of it. As the doc was preparing the jab, Ray suddenly opened his eyes wide and looked up. He unexpectedly looked very clear and fine, not in any pain that he had previously looked to be in, except his face that was suddenly so pale, it was as if the life had just completely left his body. But his eyes looked to be observing everyone around him, looking for something. What exactly? No one could tell. It was very disconcerting, to say the least. The doctor came over to him and held his arm, trying to give him a shot, but he did not get to do so. Before he could grab hold of Ray's arm, Ray grabbed the doctor by the arm and bit down, right into the arm, through flesh and blood. Everyone in the room let out surprised screams and gasps at that, including the doctor, whose screams were loudest of all. The doctor tried to scramble away from him, struggling to free his arm. His shouts rose Edward up from the shocked stupor he had fallen into, witnessing the whole spectacle. He rushed forward and grabbed Ray by the collar of his shirt, pulling at him and trying to make him let go of the doctor, but he did not. The doctor and Edward doubled down on Ray to make him loosen his grip, and finally got the doctor free from his mouth. The relief was short-lived, however. As soon as Ray had his mouth free from the doctor's arm, he lunged at the nearest person again. The nearest person just happened to be Edward, unfortunately. So he snatched up Edward and bit into him, this time going directly for the neck. Meanwhile, as the room's door was closed, other people outside of the room and the ones downstairs were all unaware of what was going on in that unfortunate part of the building, including the casino administration and the casino guests. and there were a lot of people gathering downstairs already. The night had begun to fall, and visitors had started arriving in their expensive outfits and their fancy cars. Everything outside of that one room was in full swing and filled with excitement and life, and all the hubbubs that came with it. Just 2 floors down, the top VIP guest had also hit the poker floor that night, with a mistress on his arm and flaunting his wealth from head to toe all around him. Gus, the head of security, was also busy in walking the floor and greeting guests. Everyone stayed unaware of the building doom, enjoying some last moments of ignorance before the disaster was bound to strike. Fletcher walked out of his office with 3 of his bodyguards flanking him. He started greeting all his guests that he came across, shaking hands with them and sipping from the flute of an expensive champagne that he held in his hand. While on his rounds, he came across the head of the serving staff of the casino and gave him instructions for the night.
I want you to go check up on our VIP guest in the high-limit room, and also tell someone to go see if the doc can send someone to help out the Hoover Dam site.
The man rushed to comply with the orders and sent one of the waitresses to check up on the doc as he himself went over to the VIP guest room. The waitress walked into the doctor's office as ordered to do so, but quickly came to an abrupt halt at seeing the scene inside. There were 4 wounded and bloodied people walking around in the room without any seeming direction or aim, and randomly bumping into things as a result. She went in to ask what exactly was going on, but she realized it by herself quickly when she got a good look at their appearance. These were not living people anymore. They were walking dead. Zombies, her mind supplied. Or at least that's what the movies always called them. Unfortunately, her realization was a bit too late. Before she could backtrack after sensing the danger, the zombies in the room had sensed her too. One of them quickly jumped upon her without giving her the time to even scream and bit down upon her shoulder, right at the base of her neck. She was fairly close to the door, and the zombie was a bit clumsy in its haste too, as she managed to get away from him after that first bite. Just barely so, but still, she did make it out of the room. As she rushed out, running around and looking for some kind of help, she stumbled upon a bodyguard. She tried to reach for him, but her wound was quite severe, making her unable to move any longer. So instead, she tried to yell for help. The bodyguard heard her pleas and came running, only to reach her and watch her die on the floor of the lounge. He saw the trail of blood the woman had left behind. It was leading all the way over to the doctor's office. The bodyguard pulled out his pistol and followed the trail, hoping to detain the threat before it could cause even more harm. He walked over to the doctor's office, only to see that there was nobody in the room anymore. But something nefarious had definitely taken place in that room. Everything was in a state of disarray, misplaced, fallen, even broken. It was as if a hurricane came and hit only that room and nothing outside of it. And then there was an even more worrisome sight. The splatters of blood and flesh everywhere. He was still inspecting the room and guessing what could have possibly gone on in there when he heard a scream coming from the poker room. The bodyguard hurried to the poker room only to see the body of that waitress was not at the place where he had left it, and a trail of blood was now leading inside of the poker room. He stormed into the room, and the mystery of that disappeared dead body of the waitress was now solved. The same waitress was now biting into the neck of a man at the poker table. He rushed towards the pair and snatched the woman off the guy's back. The woman quickly turned towards him, baring her teeth and growling as if itching to bite him. That's when he realized he was not face to face with a human being any longer. They were dealing with zombies now, possibly more than one, considering the fact that someone must have turned the waitress into one, and also the state of the doctor's office. His musings were cut short, and also came true when 3 other zombies attacked him from behind as well, and he was no match for all of them. The last thing he witnessed in his senses was people running around in and outside of the room, trying to avoid more zombies that were rapidly closing in on the screaming crowd, biting them, eating them, and ultimately turning them into the monsters as well. The floors below them remained blissfully unaware of the upheaval going on above. The loud music, the noise, and the partying drowned out all the screams and shouts. No one could tell that something might be wrong. Up until Fletcher, busy in a conversation with a guest some 2 floors below the site of bloodshed, looked over at the craps table and saw blood running down the side of the table. The sight was not something he was hoping to see or used to in his casino. He looked up and saw the top of the ceiling was completely soaked with blood, and now the blood was pooling and spreading towards the lower floors, as if a sign that whatever it was now moving towards them, as if they were going to be the next targets. Fletcher shot up from the chair he was sitting on, the drink and the guest forgotten for now, and bellowed at security.
I want somebody to go check upstairs and see what the hell is going on up there. And somebody bring the car around. Now!
Everyone scrambled to fulfill their jobs. By now, most of the people had noticed that something was wrong. Some from Fletcher's shouting and urgency, and some from the dripping blood itself. The music was stopped to get a better reading of the situation, and soon all of the guests had stopped everything that they were doing. As of now, they could all clearly hear the shouts, screams, and growls from the upper floors. They all stayed there, still and waiting with bated breaths, waiting for an answer from the men that just went up to look into the origins of the raining blood. Their attention was diverted when, along with the blood falling inside the building, something else started falling outside of the building as well. Everyone ran over to the main front window and watched as people fell down to their deaths. Only they did not appear that dead. Battered and bloody, yes. But dead? No, not really. Or maybe they really were dead, with just very animated dead bodies. Who knew? But one thing was for sure. They did not just drop down and lay there on the ground like normal dead or dying people might. They stood up and started attacking others, everyone they came across, left and right, front and back. No one was spared. And it became very clear to everyone after that they weren't people, they were zombies. And dozens of the zombies ran to the window after noticing them, trying to get in. After witnessing some moving to the door to get in, all the guests grabbed the nearest things, tables, chairs, or stools, and rushed towards the doorway, barricading it and trying to protect themselves from the monsters outside. Fletcher saw all that was going down and could tell there was no way everyone could make it out of the building alive. And even if they did, miraculously, the zombies outside would jump on them like hungry wolves. So he, quietly, took some of his men with him and slipped out of the building through the hidden door at its side, avoiding others while doing so. They were less in number, so it went relatively unnoticed as they stayed very quiet. On their way to the car, they stumbled across a small group of zombies that had just jumped from the 3rd floor right in front of their eyes. Fletcher recognized Edward right away and knew then and there that all of it had started because of that bloody stone. As soon as the zombies had gotten a safe distance away from them, they rushed to the cars. Fletcher jumped into his Rolls-Royce right away and quickly pulled out the glowing rock with his handkerchief still wrapped around it, careful not to touch it. He smirked down, staring at it.
Grab that camera and take my picture!
He shouted at the man next to him, who hurried to comply.
I think I found something that might change the world, fellas.
The resounding laughter was the only thing heard in that car for a while, as it quickly drove away. Back at the casino, Gus quickly made his way around all the staircases to the upper floors and closed off the doors, trapping the zombies in the stairways. They did not know how long it was going to last, but at least it was something for now. They had to think about what to do next, quickly. Gus was thinking about possible solution when Wendy, a waitress, yelled to him. He turned to look at what she was trying to say, only to see her pointing to the window. Dozens of zombies that were trying to get inside had all resorted to pushing upon the glass, and he could tell that the pressure they were putting on it was soon going to pay off. He yelled at everyone to back away from the glass before it broke. His words came true not a minute later. The front window slowly began to crack. The faces of the people inside now looked trapped and terrified. They did not know what to do anymore. They did not even have any time left to spend on knowing what to do next. They were truly in the face of their imminent death, or zombification now. The front glass broke with a resounding crack, and all hell broke loose. Dozens of zombies rushed inside all at once. The guests could only retreat as far as the front lobby of the casino before the zombies were upon them, biting them, eating them, ripping them apart. It was a bloodbath. Gus ducked a zombie coming for his head and decapitated him with a knife. He spotted Wendy again nearby, still somehow unharmed, and grabbed her hand and took off running into the far end of the lobby, still a somewhat empty area. People were trying to get away from the building, so getting inside was far easier and less interrupted. So they kept running and ducking and pushing through the zombie horde until they had reached the kitchen, miraculously unscathed. They hid there in the kitchen, trying to keep their breathing and voices down in hopes that it would make them not attract any more zombies towards them.
I have a chest full of guns in my back room, but we can't make it up the main stairs,
Gus whispered, keeping an eye on the door of the kitchen.
What else do you have on you right now, except your gun?
Asked Wendy, being just as careful and keeping quiet.
Nothing,
said Gus as he moved to check the magazine, only to see around a dozen bullets in it.
Should we risk it then?
Asked Wendy.
Go into that chest.
We can't just stay here and wait for our death after all,
replied Gus with a wry smile.
We have to try.
Their mind made, they moved to get out of the kitchen and up the stairs. But before leaving, they checked around the kitchen and found some half-dozen knives of all sizes and took those along with them. Immediately upon exiting, they came across a group of zombies. They were quick to take them out using both the knives and bullets. The gunfire attracted other zombies towards them, and they came flocking. Gus and Wendy kept running towards the staircase, throwing knives and shooting their way, only to find it stormed with more zombies. They had to duck into the nearest room to take refuge. Shutting the door behind them, they blocked it with whatever they could find. It wasn't much, and it wasn't going to hold. This they knew. And now they had one knife and 2 bullets left between them. They stood against the door, listening to the zombies on the other side, trying to break in, when Gus turned to Wendy and showed her a bite mark on his upper arm.
I don't know when I'm gonna turn, but I don't want you to hang around trying to figure it out, okay? I've only known you for just a few years, but I can say for sure, you are a true gangster.
He said, handing her his Tommy gun, and Wendy knew it was goodbye for them. Before she could say anything back to him, the door started to give in to the pressure. it finally began to break open. As soon as the first zombie came through the door, Gus plunged his knife right into him, but he was soon taken under. More and more zombies came pouring into the room and overpowered him, feasting upon him while he was still alive. The rest turned to Wendy. Outnumbered and only 2 bullets left on her, Wendy stood off with her Tommy gun, lighting up the room as the gun dropped out hot bullet shells to the floor.